And so it's like jungle justice. He stole my aunt. Oh yeah, get low. Like.
Said I'm running in this letter and letting you know that my brother, he go better, he done better. Oh, na, 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 na. I'm running in this letter and letting you know that my sister, he go better, he done better. Oh.
This is episode 5 of the Better Informed Immigrant podcast, and today KD is back from Nigeria. And we also brought on a guest to help us with one of our topics, a friend of ours, James, that's also online. So KD and James, how are you guys doing today?
Doing great.
Definitely doing good.
Before we actually start, I have to ask KD this question. So you said you were going to go eat all the food in Nigeria. Did you actually have the time to eat any of this food? Did you go out of Lagos State to go eat food just for food?
No, I didn't get the chance.
So none of that Igbo soup, all of that talk was for nothing?
Oh, no, I wouldn't have missed that one. That one I couldn't miss. I found out that you could have someone cook all this soup and you buy it, which is what I did.
Is it the same level of quality?
Yes, I actually think that you get a better value for money and the quality because they're cooking it for you, just for you.
Okay.
It costs more, but the value I get from that is better than just going out there somewhere looking for a restaurant to get it from.
Okay. That brings up a question that I'm going to ask you later, maybe during our fantasy section of the podcast. But I want to bring James on. So James is the resident lawyer in our friend group. I'll let James give a quick introduction about himself, and then would like to talk about this whole TikTok ban that's happening here in the US and what his thoughts are about it. So, Pa James, apart from being the resident lawyer and the resident footballer, I should say, although now that you are injured, we can call it something else. Any background you want to provide to the audience about who you are?
Yeah, just a guy who grew up in Ibadan, who moved to the States and tried to figure out life on his own. And now I live in Stamford, Connecticut. Legal broad background. I love taking pictures, still play soccer. Well, now I'm coaching now, and I play a lot of ping pong or table tennis. That's my twice a week, 3 times a week physical activity and therapy. So if anybody wants to spar on the table, yeah, please hit me up.
You cannot say you play soccer anymore now, because the last time I saw you, you were limping. So
absolutely, bro, absolutely. But I'm trying to get out there just to sort of increase my range of motion. So chasing after and coaching, young ones is giving me that opportunity again. So I'm grateful for that.
All right, that's cool. So let's start with the TikTok ban that's going on. So a little bit of background here, right? Congress passed a bill that includes other things, but the one of the points we're going to discuss today, it includes a ban on TikTok. Specifically, it's giving TikTok a certain number of days. I think it's approximately 250 days or so to either divest from its parent company or be banned in the US. And there's been a lot of uproar actually before the bill passed, but there's been uproar afterwards. And there are a lot of different perspectives, right? So some people are talking about, hey, it's a national security risk for the US. I think it's interesting that there's uproar about a Chinese company operating in the US when US companies of the same type cannot operate in China, and there doesn't seem to be a big issue about that. Nobody here in the US seems to be complaining much about the fact that Facebook and all these other social apps are not allowed to operate in China. But we seem to have a lot of uproar about the fact that TikTok is maybe banned here in the US. So I wanted to, James, kind of looking at it from the legal perspective, is talk about some of the different perspectives that's out there, some of the legal arguments that may be made in the future. And we will then proceed and talk about how some of those legal perspectives may or may not play out in some of our African countries, since our focus tends to be on the African immigrants.
Yeah, so what you just pointed out is one thing actually, is one of the, I thought about it, but I hadn't thought about it the way you put it, is the irony of the role that the U.S. has in democracy, right? So part of our argument that some people bring up is if China can do it, if Russia can ban it, then so can the United States. We have the right to ban it, which seems pretty straightforward. But that also depends on what you think the role of the United States is with regards to having a free democracy and being that shiny city on the hill, or whatever that phrase is. The counterpoint to that is, if we're going to say we should have freedom of the press, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, and all the sort of like First Amendment freedoms, then why is one particular social media app more dangerous than the other. In as much as we're exporting Facebook and Instagram to all these other nations, and all these other nations are creating their own, ways of suppressing speech, right? We can't stand on a leg and fight their suppression of speech if we're also doing the same thing. So what you pointed to is that irony on the other end, where if we're exporting our social media, we should also allow other people to export their social media. So there's that angle, right? The problem we have here is, yes, we do have a constitution that bars the government from essentially creating any law that infringes on people's right to associate, to gather, to discuss. There's this common theory that we always have. I can't remember who said it, but it's a theory. It's called the marketplace of ideas, being that you should allow every idea compete in the market, in an open market. And that's been the jurisprudence that the court has had over free speech, has always been around that, is that all products should be allowed in the marketplace so that they should compete. And by virtue of being in the market and competing, the underlying theory is the good idea is going to work out, right? And like people are going to go out there and purchase good ideas and better ideas. And that's how good ideas get refined, right? And, through discourse, through challenges, you sort of weed out the bad ideas and the good idea essentially survives. So here comes TikTok, a company that's in China. And by default, Chinese laws allow the ability for the government to essentially have significant control over it. If the government can have significant control over both the product as well as the data that it has, then there's that fear that it could be used for something else. That's the elephant in the room. That's the top secret files that we're not privy to, that Congress has seen and has said, by virtue of how dangerous this company is, then we have a right to pass a law that would ban it, right? The flip side of not having that transparency into what that top secret information they have is you're unable to tell how true it is, right? It could be a matter of the information that's currently on TikTok that's going viral are the kind of content that may not be necessarily top secret or anything. It may just be like the government really legitimately just wants to quell a certain kind of speech, right? So think about, like, for a good example, which a lot of people have pointed to, is most of the information that's coming out of Gaza is being pushed and being seen quickly through TikTok, right? So you have the few people who have access to internet and data and phones pushing a lot of information out, which is real-time information that can go viral within an instant. And so the number of searches, number of information that people are receiving about how desperate the situation is might be a problem for U.S. policies. And that is not top secret information, right? But it could be like the content itself is something that they being whoever is making U.S. policies, Congress, I'm not, this is all possible here. But to the extent that it's not necessarily that the information itself is not necessarily top secret, but that the idea that a lot of people passing this information may be able to start protests on campuses, may be able to fuel people being unruly or disorderly, there's also that angle of it. So now the question now becomes, who gets to decide what is top secret or what is in the best interest of the United States? And if speech that we have is that level, like, does it rise up to the level of this is national security? By us not knowing, it has to go through the court system, right? So the good thing about the U.S. and a lot of these democracies have some version of it is that we have what you mentioned earlier, which is the separation of powers, right? You have some people who make the laws, some people who enforce the laws, and some people who decide if the laws are actually worth enforcing or beyond the scope of each one, like the sort of the neutral arbiters. And all three of them are supposed to be working in concert so that you can achieve a sort of like balance, right? Do they always work? Is it possible that one person controls everything? Absolutely. But the idea is if you have three separate branches of government, then those three sort of are in equilibrium. And, if one pushes to the right too much, and they don't do the will of the people, then the left side can, or one side can essentially push the other way around. And the people being the neutral sort of like deciders of who's going to be the president, who's going to be your senators, who's going to be, your congressmen, your representatives. And by virtue of that, you also determine who your judges are. So some judges are appointed, some judges are elected. And so the people essentially have a say in that sort of democratic lifestyle. So given TikTok as an example, when your Congress people have decided that they've seen top secret information that say TikTok is posing a national security threat. National security threat could be Palestine. It could be Russia feeding information. Russia being the elephant in the room that massive bad guy that we always try and say some Russia is. It could be whatever country doesn't have the U.S.'s best interest that's proliferating, I guess, information to kids, to adults, to, in one way or the other, that's sort of manipulating the free marketplace of ideas, right? Who gets to decide? And now you have a situation where Congress has passed that law. The president has probably signed it. So you have those two arms that are in concert. The third arm that's going to be the ultimate arbiter is going to be the judiciary, right? So your judges come in and say, why did Congress pass this law? And are they violating the Constitution, which is their bottom line, the baseline? On something that's just usually top secret or confidential or something of that nature, a normal judge would look at the facts and go review in chambers and be like, whoa, okay, this sounds like it's top secret, right? And then make that determination. For something like this, most judges don't want to second guess national security, right? Because you don't want to be the judge that presided over allowing, terrorist policies or things that could jeopardize the security of a whole country in. So they usually defer to the legislatures who have usually made the laws. In instances like this, where not only has Congress acted, but the president is also rubber stamped it becomes a little bit more precarious for any judge to sort of look back and be like, nope, this is not top security anymore. Because they usually in those instances default to Congress has acted. Congress has looked at the information, has made a decision, president is all in favor. But you also have this sort of balancing interest of free speech, right? So there's numerous ideas of free speech being one of the main privileges that a free society has, like the ability to agree and disagree about an issue and bring it to light and express it in that sort of marketplace of ideas. And so it is fundamental that you need to be able to disagree. Otherwise, you start becoming what the founders didn't want in the first instance. Someone that taxes you and takes all your money and then sends you to war like the monarchs did before, right? And so free speech needs to be able to say, I don't like what this monarch is doing. I don't like what this president is doing, or whatever the counterpart is. That is a fundamental right that the government itself does not sort of shrink those rights. To the extent that the government has an interest in that speech, there's a whole jurisprudence that has developed over free speech. So free speech by itself is not absolute. It doesn't talk to, if you go and say, I have free speech and go talk to your boss, you can get fired anytime. It doesn't extend in the same places, in the same context all the time, right? So the government's usually the one who's saying, government can't impinge on your rights, on your ability to say, to speak, or to gather, and to do these things. There's time, place, and manner restrictions. So here's the time you can protest. You can protest between 5 a.m. and 5 p.m. You can get a permit for your protest. You can have police presence to escort you throughout your whole protest. We can block down highways. We can do all these other things. We can essentially prescribe reasonable time, place, manners. And there's a whole jurisprudence around this. There's a whole limited public forum. What's a public forum, a limited one, and none? There's a whole jurisprudence, and what you can say, it's all data specific and all fact specific on all these issues. But to the extent that an app, right, is allowing people to speak, there's that part of, one, I'm a business entity and this shouldn't apply to me because I'm merely publishing people's thoughts, which I think if a social media platform would be able to say, hey, I'm a publisher of thoughts, right? I'm a publisher of what people in Gaza are saying, people in Ukraine are saying, people in Sudan are saying. I'm not necessarily the one who's creating that speech, right? I'm just a publisher. Anytime you're going against what I'm saying or what people are saying, you're limiting their speech as well as their access to a platform to speak by banning us completely. And you're also, in one way or the other, engaging in a viewpoint discrimination. So you're saying, based on the substance of what's being said here, you're not allowed to say it. And courts usually frown on that. When you're trying to chill the speech before it's spoken, right? That's usually a no-no. So there's all that I assume TikTok is going to argue that you're essentially singling us out. We're not the only social media platform. We're not the only ones that could be, taken over by a different country or a different entity, or, you're also forcing us to sell. We can't sell the engine because China's relatively said, no, you can't sell the algorithm. So you're telling us that we should sell the shell of the company. And there's no bite in that, right? There's no bite in that. There's no one who's going to want to buy it. You're essentially killing us. So they have a lot of arguments to put forth. It's just going to be a balance of, is the court willing to side on national security versus free speech in this case? And that I don't know. No one knows. But they do have an argument. They do have a say. They do have their right to their day in court. And it'll be interesting because obviously, depending on the kind of judges that they get, it may fluctuate, right? You can get a judge that's pro-free speech or one that's, pro-national security. And just based on the facts of the case and how narrowly they tailor the scope of the question, it could work its way up the courts, all the way to the Supreme Court and back down and up again. That's to be seen.
So that's interesting. Thank you for providing that explanation. So what I got from it, a couple of things, right? So you're saying there's a national security piece, there is a free speech piece, and maybe there's also the trade argument piece, but that's not necessarily something that you would argue in this particular case, since it seems to be the focus will probably be the free speech / national security and balancing those two things.
Yeah. I would agree on that. I would agree on that being like, there's a trade piece, but like companies have gone out of business left and right. Like companies could be like whole industries could go out of business in a jiffy, right? But I think fundamentally it would be, you would bring something that's more rooted in the Constitution, right? Mm-hmm. And the free speech, free association, so free association of people who are on your platform, both your ability to publish information as well as ability for other people to publish on your platform is one of those things that I think would be the best arguments.
So when you were talking about this, it just made me realize that I really know nothing about like the legal framework here in the US. So if we have time, I may ask you a few questions about some of that and how that works.
Do you see that exchange with Congress?
Oh yeah, I saw part of it. Why? It's so funny, right? Because you see quite a bit of that on a little bit of that on YouTube. And I know that there are certain similar things for like the Nigerian equivalent. I would be interested. I think we need a C-SPAN version for Nigeria, because I think some of that would be pretty entertaining TV.
Absolutely. But then you have those guys sleeping in between. And you have the people who are, using big words left and right. The jambulation of it. And then you have those guys you would understand the word that they're saying. Like,
a question for Kolade here. Like, one of the things I'm thinking about, and still staying on this TikTok thing, I'm not really dwelling on TikTok itself, but it is, I think, a little impressive for us to say that a foreign company has its day in court. I'm a little biased here and maybe I'm not well informed, but I think about like the Nigerian system because I know a little bit about that, just very little. And I don't think, even if you were a citizen, I don't think you have your day in court, much less if you were like a foreign company. For example, I guess an equivalence would be Binance, right? So I know one of the executives in Nigeria fled the country, but one of them is currently in jail as they're trying to do the trial thing. And they just want to go pick them up and put them in jail while they arrange them in court, which is kind of very funny, right? So that's not the same thing, I think, here in the US, where you have some kind of due process that is followed. So thoughts about that before I punt it over to James, see if he has any additional thoughts.
Yeah, definitely. I was actually going to also bring up the idea that the rift between China and the US is playing a major role with what we're experiencing with TikTok, because if we go back years when things were actually cordial and there was no rift, I don't know if we'll be having this same situation or experience with TikTok getting banned, but that's on one side. On the other side, I think I'm with the group of people that says security first. So I left Nigeria to come here. So if security is becoming an issue, maybe I should go back to Nigeria, you know? So
it's so funny you say that. Like, an American would say, when I say an American, I mean people who, let us say, were either born here or fully identify with that ideology, would say, my liberties are more important. You were so willing to give up your liberty so quickly just for security.
Security first. We don't know what liberty is in Nigeria, so what we look for is security first. I think that alone is where I come with the idea that I don't know if there are hidden agendas for this, or if like the government has other things that they're trying to pursue. But if you come forward with a security angle, I think you win every time, because like they said, data is right there in China. China can do whatever they want with it, and that could be disturbing. And now to the flip side, when we're talking about the same experience in Nigeria, I think in some cases we're actually evolving as a country, where foreign companies are starting to actually answer to some of their actions in Nigeria. And recently, a Chinese company in Abuja, I think, was shut down because they opted to only sell to their own people and not to Nigerians. And that caused an uproar where people were asking, you're in our country, you're selling in our country. Why would you say you can only sell to Chinese people and we can't buy from you? I think the government stepped in that case, and then they shut the place down. I think there's still a case ongoing for that. So I would say we're making progress in that aspect, where it's not just free for all like it used to be.
So my only retort to that is I'm always very, very cautious about those claims, right? When people claim that a company said they're not serving to Nigerians, the Nigeria I know that just burns the whole place down. So the fact that we're still having a discussion there in court, I'm always very cautious to believe that it actually is true. I think in Nigeria is one of those places where, because of the lack of due process, any claim is believed, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's like jungle justice. He stole my hand. Oh yeah, you know what? So when they say these Chinese people say they're not serving to anyone, maybe the Chinese at that day just thought the guy that didn't dress properly enough, and then they canceled it, and he didn't know who he was. He was the son of a president or son of a commissioner. And that guy got mad and literally started claims and said I was denied entry. And once we hear those sensational news, we just take it to the limit, in our country, come and see what the Chinese are. And then it becomes a xenophobic take on what's happening. So I'm just always very cautious when I hear those in Nigeria they're only teaching Chinese. I'm like, no, they are teaching you the English that you are speaking. Are they teaching you well? The Alliance Française that we've been going to, how many of us are actually really good? So if a Chinese person comes and decides to start a school where they speak Chinese, to the extent that there is American International School and British International School, I'm all for another Chinese international school. That is the angle that I'm always very sort of contemplative when I'm are these really, really true? Did they really, really deny you service because of your skin color or because of something else? Maybe it was a private event, right? But you won't have time to explain to anyone that it was a private event when the person has gone to call the cops, right? Especially with language barriers, and then the xenophobia kicks in, and it's then So I'm not saying that story is not true or anything. I just for me, I'm just a little bit cautious.
I hear what you're saying, and I tend to agree with you. Although I would say that perhaps I'm not as cautious as you are about believing some of these things. What I would also say, though, is that actually, James, when is the last time you went to Nigeria?
Last year, September.
Okay. So what I would say, in addition to what you just said there, though, is that I don't believe that the common citizen has access to the police or to any of the legal mechanisms that exist in that country. And what do I mean by that is that it's been my experience that of late, the police seem to be there to just take advantage of the common citizen that they are to enforce the rights and privileges of the citizens, if that makes any sense. I mean, I will give you an example. I'm sorry, say that again.
No, you're saying I agree with you. I think our police system, the U.S. police system, does not work. Let's this one that we are talking.
Are you talking about the U.S. or talking about Nigeria?
So Nigeria is even worse. I don't know why we're expecting better. In the US, at least they pay them overtime and they can bill time and a half to go and do nonsense, to go and search and frisk.
I'm not talking about, you see.
Now you talk about a person who hasn't even been paid. So,
you're letting your politics get involved. I was talking about the Nigerian police.
I don't know why you're expecting them.
The reason why I bring that up is so there are two things that come to mind, right? So for me, Kolade and I actually had a personal experience where one police was basically
it was bugayin.
It was power hungry. I would say it that way. That was one example. But this other thing I would say too is that, in my opinion, there's a lot of fear and trembling that's going on of late. And when I mean of late, of the past few years, like, people don't seem to riot as they used to do in the past. I think the last big riot I can think of is that the NSAS era. Since then, a case example for this would have been, when I think it was last year or the year before, when the elections were taking place and people didn't have access to their cash. There were even though people I don't know if this is true, I do know that I saw lines of people at every bank and nobody was getting money. I couldn't get money. That was in Nigeria at the time. But nobody seems to be rioting or anything like that at that time, which I was very surprised about, because I know that I was deeply affected by that. And I know other people, I had some capital, and other people that don't have that much capital. I can only imagine what they had to do just to survive for that period of time when the access to cash was limited based on a policy by the government. But moving on from that topic, KD, you just came from Nigeria, right? So we'll call it the land of the free and the land of Amala Tabula.
The land of the brave.
Tell us a little bit about your trip to Nigeria. Like, what was the experience like? What were some things that you saw the change? You were there last year as well. So what were some of the things that you saw that were changing, either for better or for worse, compared to the last time you went? And what were some potential opportunities, I should say, because I don't know that we're going to actually implement any of them.
Yeah, it was a good trip. At least 2 weeks and some days. I didn't expect to cover as much ground that I was able to. But the one thing that I would still say is that each time we go, we tend to think things are moving forward, and then you go and face something else and like, okay, I don't know where we are at this point. Like, are we moving forward or backward, or are we just in the middle? But the one positive that I can always point to when it comes to like trips to Nigeria is you're always getting the chance to either experience or meet people who are constantly looking for ways either to create innovative services or looking for ways to create new businesses. Because I think the economy itself put people in a situation where you have to evolve or you have to create something to be able to make ends meet or to be able to generate some kind of revenue for yourself. And that's just really for entrepreneurs. Like, people who are just looking for a job, they don't care if people are creating new things or not. They just want a job. But the few that are constantly looking for ways to create ideas and innovate and create new businesses, even in the midst of the challenges that you have over there, that aspect still surprises me. Like, every time I go, there are people telling you about opportunities. I went to like a 300-acre property. They called, I forgot the name of the road, but it's the road that actually connects to Benin Republic. The land itself is actually close to the major road. And one of the opportunities that I saw there was the idea that if you're buying a land in that part of the city, you're also buying like a workforce, because the people who live there are also farmers, and they are constantly looking for opportunities like that, where an investor buys a land and they get more job opportunities. And it was interesting to me that the way to pay these people is actually to buy food for the year. So they're not asking for a specific salary. They're just saying, provide food. If it's a bag of whatever food you provide monthly, just get the food stuff and bring it. I think also because proximity to the marketplace for them is harder, they would benefit more from you bringing them things that they would normally have to go out to go get, as opposed to you paying them. So that caught me off guard when we just sat down to kind of discuss the opportunity, because the people I went with are also a group that are in charge of selling the land. So it just really helps me put into perspective that I think one of our strengths would be our workforce, but we're not really minding that opportunity. The few money men in Nigeria that are able to do that, I think they're benefiting from it. And recent developments also show that even in the tech space, American companies are actually hiring from Nigeria now because they could pay you $500 and it will be so valuable because of the currency exchange where it is now, compared to if they have to hire someone here, or even India, because India has also evolved over the years. So I think our workforce is one big opportunity over there that if one can creatively find a way to tap into amidst all the other challenges, which those we cannot really run away from. So I would say that's one of the positives that I noticed over there. And I think you probably can attest to some aspect of this when we both traveled down and we had people like just covering conferences and exhibition, and whatever we're paying still makes it easier for us to still have a good margin. And that helps you grow the business more. It helps you expand the business because the cost of labor is not really going to be a major overhead for you. So I would say that's the one positive outside of the other craziness that we're still trying to fix.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. Yeah, I have to think about that a little bit. So, when it comes to Nigeria, my mind tends to go towards what are the things that could go wrong, right? First. So I do agree that labor is cheap, or is cheaper there. So that's something that could be taken advantage of. And one thing we could talk about during the fantasy section would be doing something like Fiverr or whatever that those services are for like Nigeria, just focus on Nigeria or Nigerian talent, I should say. But the other thing I would also say, though, is that it doesn't seem to me that there's this mindset of collaborating for mutual success, right? So the same people that you were talking about, and I don't know these people, I'm just making an example here. Mm-hmm. I don't know that you can trust them to work on that land without necessarily spending all your time trying to manage them, right? Because you're always going to have to constantly making sure that this guy or this lady is doing what he or she is supposed to do, even though that you are delivering on all of your commitments to them. I mean, a case in point would just be pick any company in Nigeria and look at how the workforce behaves. And that may be a culture thing that, it's a work culture that you would need to deal with and modify. But that's something to think about in the sense that, yes, labor is cheap, but if you cannot fully utilize that labor to make something that is useful in society and that can be sold, then what's the point?
Correct. And I thought of that too. And I don't know if James had anything on this before I add another piece to it.
Yeah, I was in my opportunities ideas in Nigeria, and I went on a mental tangent of like why our credit cards don't work. Like that was what my mind was thinking of when you asked your question.
Do we have credit cards?
See, that's the thing. Why does Visa and MasterCard don't work in Nigeria? Like for me,
they have them now. Actually, they do, but
it has to be a Nigerian card, right? It has to be a Nigerian issued card.
Yes, and I don't know that a lot of places take them. Actually, that's not true because that's what you use in a POS machine, right?
Correct, but it has to be like a First Bank card.
It's Nigerian. I don't think the challenge is Nigerian banks. I think the challenge is foreign banks, right? I think Nigeria has been flagged as having too many fraud transactions in the past that foreign entities are not necessarily willing to take the risk, right? It's just easier for them to just say, hey, your card is not going to work there than it is to say, we're going to try to make sure that the fraud prevention mechanisms are going to be effective in this country.
But to the extent that we have, sorry, I know this is another different tangent, but that's what my brain was like about.
Give the tangent. That's what we're here.
Like two-factor authentications and things like that. And so like, it's not like we can't, so like I was able to use my card in Egypt last time I went. And then I wasn't able to use it in Nigeria. But part of it was my bank knew I was flying to Nigeria based on the fact that I used the same card to buy a ticket from here to Nigeria. And when I had also booked an Airbnb in Egypt, there was also that like, oh, he's going to stop over in Egypt. And anytime those like transactions got like flagged, there's that two-factor authentication system where it just sends it to my cell phone, which is registered to my card. Like, hey, fraud chase alert. $35 was supposed to be used at a cafe in Egypt. Like what? And my mind just went to a whole like, why doesn't that same principle of work in Nigeria? Even if the risk factor is to say it takes 4 days for that transaction to actually go through or be approved after they've had you like literally, spill blood and put your blood as the receipt maker. I don't care what that was what my mind was at when you asked your question. So sorry, I was just like,
we'll collect your DNA just to validate the transaction.
Confirm. I feel like they say, okay, once you use this, is juju style. Like, put your right thumbprint on it. Just
do you swear? Solemnly swear.
You saw pee in this cup and let us take that cup and we'll test to make sure it's you. Like, I don't care what the infrastructure is to make it work. But those are just, when you started thinking of possibilities, that's what I was thinking of.
Wow. I see.
Sorry, to your earlier idea of just like, I think one of the main drivers of Nigeria is, and I've said this about any quote unquote developing country, is the fact that we can leapfrog the mistakes of the West. For anything we're doing now, we can always leapfrog the mistakes of the West. I've had the same idea with like electricity, right? Like the West, there's no point in having overhead poles anymore, right? Like all those unsighting poles everywhere. The only time you see them in the West is the middle of jungle, in the middle of nowhere, where there are high power transmission lines. Other than that, they're underwater. They have power lines running on the ground. And so to the extent that we can build a system, right, where there's power supply everywhere, there's literally no point in having those overhead monstrosities that we have these days. We can always just jump from solar panels to underground systems. And so I make this point to say, it is easy to spot these opportunities because the West has done so much of the mistakes, so that the time when Africa or anywhere is adopting these systems, we're learning from their mistakes. Like there's no point for us to not have high-speed rails at this point. We don't need to go back to coal rails anymore. We can essentially just jump the whole bridge and have someone from China literally install high-speed rails in. So I think what we always see is that there are always opportunities. There's always opportunities of what is prominent right here at this juncture in the West for it to be adopted. That's just to say we'll always look forward and be like, yeah, there's always going to be a land of opportunities. Whether it's paying people in dollars, knowing that there'll be fluctuations in the exchange rate over time, and people are happy with it because they're coming from a place where they don't always get paid. Now they're getting paid consistently in foreign dollars when there's always a shortage of foreign dollars and a huge fluctuation in prices. Like, you're always going to have that. Now you can have people learn, right? Learn, the same way Kola can start coding classes online and have people in Nigeria learn those coding, and then they can be a part of your workforce here. Like, you can always skip the line of having to go and start a school for coding in Nigeria when you can just teach them online, barring the time differences, and then employ them. So sorry, that was another tangent in my head, but that was what my brain was thinking of when you asked the question.
Yeah, I want to quickly jump on the power lines and not having poles. Remember at the beginning of this podcast that I said security is one of our major concerns.
Absolutely.
And you want to put all those cables under the ground. It makes it easy for us to not see them tomorrow morning. Tonight, not the next morning. But up where they are, if somebody is climbing, you can go and put the ladder.
I agree. But to the extent that no one, like, so...
It is more expensive, though.
I have a whole theory on how to, like, literally electrify Nigeria, by the way, if we're ever going to talk about that.
Oh, I want to hear this theory, but we'll talk about that next. I want to hear it. We're going to just put everything aside to talk about this. Yeah. I would say, though, from a practical perspective, right, it's more expensive to put the cables on the ground, right, because you have to dig the ground and things like that. And usually you're using heavy-duty equipment to do it. So I don't know that you have to worry about thefts in the same way that you are thinking about, because if you see somebody have shovel and is digging for 3 days or so to get to the power cable,
these things are sometimes like 2,400 feet or 24 feet underwater or inside the water. Like, if you are that desperate to go and tip wire, bill me.
No, the funny thing. So
don't underrate us.
Guy, this is so like, you can talk about pipelines. They are like pipelines, yes. People will just siphon. They just need it to be bleeding up, right? Like, and then, like, that one is fine. But if you need to go and be electrocuted underwater,
no, I don't think, I don't know this for a fact. I think the challenge with power, specifically in Nigeria, is the government not willing to invest money into that sector. Benin Republic, which is right next door, has power.
I agree. Yep.
24/7 power. Togo has 24/7 power. Ghana has 24/7 power.
Nigeria, they celebrated 10 years of uninterrupted power supply. I was in Nigeria then. 10 years.
Oh, it's an interesting concept. But before we go there, KD, what other things did you see in Nigeria, or what other things would you like to throw up there for fantasies? I was taking some notes when you were talking earlier, because there might be some things I may be interested in having a conversation about.
I had several meetings, and I'm just trying to pick out the ones that I can discuss right here. I signed some non-disclosure, so I need to be sure of what I'm giving out.
I see.
So I actually met someone, and I'll pick this one because it actually connects to what James suggested in terms of electricity, which again was the reason why I said there are people out there who are constantly looking for ways to create either new services or products that could enhance people's lives. So I met someone who used to be one of the global head for Globalcom in Nigeria. It was formerly at Sony Ericsson, when Sony Ericsson was still out there in Nigeria. So one thing he brought up was creating a device that would actually connect to people's prepaid meter. And the idea behind that is to help people monitor their usage, number one, and also to receive alerts for when they're about to exhaust their usage. That way they can actually know to recharge or reload before it's fully exhausted. Because one of the challenges that they're having over there is if you wait and have it like all exhausted, the process of then reloading it takes longer. I was told there are times that people would pay and it doesn't even work instantly. Sometimes you have to go to their office and tell them like, hey guys, I've paid like for the past 48 hours and my meter is still at zero, before they will actually then go into the system to help you fix it. So you were saying to kind of have that device available to people, and it would be monetized in a way that actually makes it so cheap, because I guess it's sold on the idea that you go with the volume and then you can make your profit off the volume as opposed to making it expensive. So it could be as cheap as 50 naira, 100 naira a month to have that device connected to your prepaid meter, and you just keep using it. And then it would be synced to your phone, so you can actually receive alerts and notifications. So that, I would say, is one thing that I just, from him just explaining all that to me, I felt like even in the midst of there is this no light, we're still trying to figure out ways to help people, knowing their meter is almost out. It's just something that I thought really is encouraging. Like just meeting people who still wants to create stuff.
That's a really good point. Okay, good to know. And since we're talking about meter and power, let's hear James's idea for electrifying Nigeria. I'd like to hear this story. James, tell us the story.
So, full disclosure, I am a power guy right now. I think that I went to school for energy and environmental law, and I'm finally in that power space. So, awesome. I'm getting to see I'm getting to see the history of an authority that has been in existence since, FDR was the one who, before he was president, was the one who actually created the authority and said, we're going to regulate the water from Niagara Falls and the Lawrence River and make sure it's available for the people of New York, right? So I'm seeing how the history, including the history of the authority itself, like the authority that regulates power in New York, as well as the political pressures have changed, and both its mandates then and now, and how that history essentially brings us to this stage and the kind of power it supplies to the whole entire New York state. So that's one aspect of currently, right? But I'm also speaking from someone who, while I was schooling, went to a house. Like they took me to this house, fancy house on a hill that was just isolated, right? The house was isolated because the person built that house, got a plot of land, built the house, and asked them, okay, how much to pull power from down the street to my house? And they told them was because the house is a new plot of land that is nowhere in that, your driveway is kind of high, all that. For you would have to like Nigeria style, bring out a pole for you and then set up everything, and it'll cost you 25,000. However, your other option is for you to fully integrate your house and have solar panels and have your house run for $10,000 plus state rebates, right? So at that point, it was a no-brainer for them. They literally put a payment plan on, and they have 2 batteries in their house, in the basement of the house, which I saw. The house is a fully functional, 4 or 5 bedroom house like you would see. You wouldn't know anything about the house. When you walk into the house, there's an iPad by the door that tells you the battery level, that tells you what's consuming the most energy at that moment, that syncs up with your phone. So to Bolade's idea of being able to understand how much more you have left to be able to figure out, how are you reading your meter? Mm-hmm. The house itself is, it's about Bolade's idea. It also has, your house tells you that. That technology has been available for years, stateside, in Vermont, in rural Vermont, where they put on they put on a microwave, and you could see the power change and you could see it fluctuate. So this is a fully functional house that has fridge, washer, dryer, everything you can imagine, but just has 2 batteries and a solar panel on top. And for me, it was glaring that the solution to Nigeria's problem was to have independent solar producers. I say independent solar producers because the house can still connect to the grid. They can still sell their electricity back into the grid if they wanted to. If they wanted to pull that line to, they would be providing more percent when they're not using their power and getting money off that from the state because there are rebates, right? I'm saying all that to say we should stop thinking of electricity as something that the government should provide for us. Electricity should be something that we provide for the government. Now, the easiest way to get about that, in my perspective, is for the government to say, going forward, any new development has to be solar panel powered. So when someone's putting a landmark hotel, beaches and whatever, any new construction that's a development I'm saying, like, if you're buying land and you want to build more than 10, 20 houses, the rule, the local government rule, the state government rule is that you install solar panels on it that's able to not take away from the grid, but to produce into the grid, right? So at that point, it's an extra expense for those people who are going to be able to afford it. Absolutely off the bat. The government is going to give incentives to that, whether it's 10%, 15%, whatever you want to give. But it should be a rule that, one, you should be able to produce for yourself so you're not taking off the grid so that we don't have to produce for you. And two, any extra you should be able to connect, right? If the government does that and provides incentives, buy solar panels on the cheap end, maybe 50 cents, sells it to these producers at 50 cents to $1 or whatever it is, what you're going to start having is silos of electricity producers who are able to connect to a grid. Doesn't mean the grid exists, but it means you're able to connect to a grid. So what eventually starts happening is the new constructions in Lekki now have self-contained power supply. The new constructions in Bagada now have self-contained power supply. The ones in Abuja do. The ones in Bagada do. The ones in Asor Villa, the ones in K2, the ones slowly what you have is a patchwork of newer, modern buildings that are able to connect to each other. So if someone wants to build a GRA of 35 houses, you're going to add that to your cost. And for someone like Kola, you that are going to Nigeria and you're saying, I want to be in a place that has 24 hours supply of electricity, they will tell you off the bat that we have, for an extra price, you're going to pay $25 extra a month. You pay that easily, like, that means I can go, be collecting my dollars, be paying money in Naira, right?
Yeah.
For that extra $25, knowing there's stable power supply without having to deal with the government. Why? We're in Africa. The sun will always come up.
So I hear what you're saying. Actually, one of the things I considered during my stay in Nigeria was I was thinking about a business case where you essentially a company, you provide the solar panels to a particular customer and the batteries and everything for free. You do the maintenance and they just pay you on a monthly basis, similar to how they pay the NEPA bill.
Absolutely. That works.
So,
but it's going to be an expensive startup cost. That is what I'm trying to avoid. That's what the government does. That's what the government role should be.
So, and I think you bring up the crux of the matter, right? There are so many things that we could talk about, but I don't know that you can rely on the government doing that kind of policy in the near term in Nigeria, right? So,
correct.
I tend to not necessarily focus on what the government will or will not do, because in my opinion, it does not seem to me that they are interested in doing anything except for siphoning the resources for their own benefit.
You're so optimistic, Kola. but I do agree with you. But I do think, like, there are companies that are like architectural companies, or are building sustainable architectures. There are LEED certified buildings in Nigeria, as much as there may not be a lot of them. To the extent that you can add that energy piece into those buildings, it doesn't necessarily have to be like the government enforcing, right? It could be state or local government. It could just be one local government that says any commercial building, right? So if you're going to put up a Hokuku house, make sure you on your own are able to supply electricity for everywhere in that building. Like anything you're going to need, that building should be literally all you need is, it's one line. Any new buildings constructed after March 10, 2025 should be able to, one, connect to to connect to the grid whenever that grid comes, whether in 2070 or not. And two, should be able to self-contained, that is able to generate and produce the amount of electricity that is needed for itself. Literally, you need just that one line.
What about the market portion of it, right? So if you had the line and the policy, right, nobody's going to build in that area, right? Because nobody can afford it, right? And like we said earlier, the government is not necessarily providing the incentives. So
but here's
how would
the
you
thing.
solve that problem?
The numbers will add up for itself, right? Well, the only thing that sucks, right, is one, this is going to be started by the elites. Let's be real. By the ones who can afford it. It's a numbers game. But the numbers account for themselves. Because the flip side is for you to go and buy inverter already, right? The flip side as a business is for you to go and buy generator. The flip side is to know that there are days when there will not be gas. And whatever the gas price is, you're going to buy it. So in terms of it being economical, the numbers already account for it themselves. So if you're like a corporate office building, you literally know that you just need to be able to provide between 9 to 5 every day for the people who are in that corporate office building. And between 5 o'clock and 9 a.m. the next morning, you can sell.
I don't know that there's a mechanism in place right now in Nigeria that where you can sell power. I don't know if there is or it isn't.
Correct.
But,
correct. That's why I said the ability to connect to the grid. The numbers will account for itself. Because think about it. If you are going to Nigeria and the office space you are looking for says, hey, we are solar panel, and for an extra $35 a month, you will have unlimited power supply. You yourself would choose that over anywhere else.
Yes, but one thing I don't think you're fully realizing, again, is the cost, right? So you acknowledge the fact that it's a significant startup cost. Absolutely. I am saying that you're not going to get the money back. So when I told you about the
back? So even if you don't get your money back from selling, you get money back from not relying on buying generators, on buying gas.
Yes, but generators and gas is cheaper. Maybe not over the long term. You can look at the calculations, but initially it's cheaper than this. For the sake of this discussion, let's just assume it's going to cost $10,000 to do it. All right. Now, when you talk about independent solar companies, there are independent solar companies in Nigeria, multiple actually. You see them quite a bit. And what they do is you can come to them and buy the individual components. They can even design the system for you and come and implement it in your house. The challenge, I think, is that it's a couple of things. Number one is it's sometimes there's a situation of the blind leading the blind. So the people that are selling don't really, they kind of have a little bit more information than the customer that's coming in, but they don't really know anything about power systems, right? So they make the wrong recommendations quite a bit. But the other thing too is that most people cannot afford that stuff. So when I gave you the example of what I was talking about, the business idea I told you about where I'm going to own the whole system as a company, I should say. I'm going to own the whole system and all you need to do is pay me monthly.
For rent,
And I was thinking to myself, hey, if you can pay, I think the calculation I came up with is I said, if you can pay 500 a night in gas for your generator, right, then that's money that could come to me. So I think I was saying it was going to be like 15,000 per month. And the numbers didn't quite add up because, again, you're buying these panels and stuff, $10,000. If you're doing 15,000 now is how much, Kolade? Is that's $10.
Yeah.
15, right? $10. Like you're almost never going to get your money back in the sense that you're going to spend so long just getting the invested capital just for the materials you put in, not to talk the maintenance and stuff. Now, if there are people who are willing to make a significant investment, I'm making numbers up. This is not real, but if they're willing to pay maybe 100,000 a month for 24/7 power, that's maybe that could work a little bit more. But I don't think that would.
And that's why I think like your initial appeal isn't to the mom and pop. It's to commercial. That's why I say like commercial buildings first, as well as developments that are like 10 or more, right? So like someone who's building a whole GRA, right? A whole landmark beach or whatever they're redoing anymore. Those are the people you want because even like all these estates, those are the people that you want to get because the money is socialized. It's almost like you're paying for HOA fees here. The money that they're asking for is not just the money for utilities. You're also paying an extra because you're paying for one, the presence of power, and two, the presence of uninterrupted power. Those are two things that you can monetize on the long run. Like if you go literally now and go to like a Coca-Cola plant and say, forget you guys using generator, we'll install this, and in 10 years, in 5 years, you get their money back and you'll be able to make money off this. Absolutely, they will.
Yeah, I wonder how. I've never been to any of the companies in
It's
the
all
big
generators.
companies. They're using generators.
It's all
the
generators.
Dangotes
That's how they can. That's how they can
Oh,
ensure.
I didn't know that. And those generators must be massive.
So think about that, and think about those generators can't fail. There needs to be another second-hand line that's ready to go if anything on the production line goes. So you start with those. You start with the huge companies. That's why I said the Cuckoo House. Like, you start with those sort of facilities that the number of people that you're looking at is not just one mom or one pop. You're looking at someone who's trying to build a whole 20-story building or a 20-house complex for the rich and famous. That's why I did say it was going to be elite in the first instance, because it's people like you that can afford the extra of, I don't just want a house. I really want my house to have all these things. You remember my friend Larry, he lives in Lagos. And what he said was like the whole estate, the whole Dolphin estate where he lives, went to PHCN, went to NEPA and was like, guys, what do we need from you to generate unlimited power supply? Uninterrupted, rather, power supply. And they were like, if you guys can come together and pay an extra X, Y, and Z amount every month, we will ensure that you guys have uninterrupted power supply. The whole village was like, the whole estate was like, yeah, go ahead, pay it, right? And that's socializing costs. You know, in Nigeria, you see a whole estate that will go and buy a transformer when one blows, right?
Well, that's normal, right? Because NEPA never buys it, but
so those are socialized costs.
I hear what you're saying. I need to.
And all you need for the most part is people to, even if they're only affording 1 or 2 panels for their individual houses, right? To be able for them to all be connected. And those costs for generating, transmitting, and supplying be essentially for that, like, estates, for Dolphin estates, for Kinikon estates, in, for Lekki Phase 1, whatever. Like, it's those small patches that become access to the grid. And by the time you start doing that, you bypass the need for the government to actually provide.
I hear what you're saying. I would say it sounds interesting.
It sounds interesting.
The concern I have is this. You start doing this, and that's when the government is going to come up with some kind of policy just to mess with you. Right?
I don't think it's a perfect system in that sense, but I think to the extent that individual people can do it on their own and just be a self-contained system, I think instead of us importing generators and exporting generators, it's the generator people that
come on, it's the politician that is importing generator. That's how they're making their money.
Absolutely. And then you can buy generator on the side but not use it. And just use it as figurehead.
Well, you understand what I mean, right?
I was actually about to ask that same question. Like, all the ideas that we've poured into this, is that considering that the government is going to just stand pat and they would not do anything while you're doing this? Or you're considering that they might actually shut it down even before it goes live?
I think the way to combat the Nigerian system, in my way, if I would do it, is literally start my first set of houses, right? Maybe have 2 pilot programs that's going on without much fanfare. And the next thing I do is broadcast it all over CNN. Like call VOA, call BBC, call their father, their mother, make sure I go viral.
No, like James, that's
wait. I will go viral to the extent that my blueprints, people be beg, the blueprints that you can just open online and see, this is how I copied it. And I do that because I feel like, although you can't shame the shameless, the only way where you can make it like don't you want to see it? We all know about, like, is to be almost shove it in their faces where they have to be market participants too. Now that might reduce your market share or whatnot, but in a situation where you're giving them the blueprints that the only way to go forward here is for you to guys to start buying solar panel and not buying generators. Because now the world is like, now I have my own generator. Maybe it works now. Like the only way is to shame them in that way where it's almost counterproductive for them to shut you down. They might limit how much your impact is in terms of what your reach is and how much money you're going to make. But everybody's going to always know that, this is the guy who brought that idea here. The government had to even become a market participant in it, right? You shame them to the extent that they become a part. They might be a competitor, but they also have to participate in that same market.
Colade, what's the name of that company that we tried investing in? The one that the government just shut down. Well,
Boy, that bitter.
Got our money.
Boy, that bitter.
Oxford.
Oxford. Oh, yeah, Oxford. Right, that company was a big company, right? And the government just shut it down like that. Like, so I don't know.
Yes, and there goes the money.
You gotta give some context and backline here.
Well, so
who did you piss off?
No, I think my point I'm trying to illustrate here is, like, you said something like that. You cannot shame the shameless, right? And one thing I listened to, there was a clip I was listening to on YouTube that said that perhaps one of the challenges for Africa is the fact that it's the regulation that they impose on businesses. I don't know this to be true, but according to the clip, it seems to be the most overregulated economic space. Whether or not that is true or not, I don't know. Case in point, GoCada, OPay, right? The original version of OPay, I mean, look at those businesses were providing services to the population that were actually needed and were thriving, and the government just came one time, basically destroyed the company. I mean, OPay was sold to somebody else who ended up turning it into like a bank and lending firm. But they both started, I think, as GoCada and OPay, I believe, started as basically, let's just call it Uber for motorcycles, right? And those don't exist anymore. So I guess one thing you could counter with that is, hey, businesses change and evolve with the times. It's just, I'm not sure that I'll be willing to invest that much money into an idea and then have the government shut it down so quickly without even let it survive. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That would be ridiculous.
And James, I'm not sure if you heard the news about the guy who went on, I don't know if it was CNN or BBC, the owner of Landmark in Lekki, because he didn't want the government to put a bypass.
Yeah.
So he too was screaming about the whole place, thinking that would stop the government.
So for him, I don't know what happened. Was it that he didn't get the required permits before he started building, or what?
Everything was, well, I don't have the facts, but according to him, he had it, and everything was actually certified before all that building and all the infrastructure he put over there was like established. And it was talking about the amount of money that has actually gone into filling up that space to make it what it is now. Yeah. And he doesn't think the government would give him half of that. Wow. So he made all that noise. And the last I saw was a clip of them just like doing whatever they want. They don't care what you've gone to do on CNN or
yeah. You know the funny thing about what we're talking about here, and I think there's a need for it, maybe for us on this podcast, if we're going to talk about issues like this, is we probably need a research arm or like some kind of small base media arm in Nigeria that's going to help us get some of the facts and interview some of these people so we can get facts of the case, rather than us making assumptions based on the limited information that we have. I think that's part of the problem with the Nigerian press, right? They tell you the sensationalized stories without any of the facts behind it, so you can't really tell what's real and what isn't, which was something James was alluding to earlier.
Well, having whatever they make available to us.
Yeah, I'd be pressed to know why. So assuming they said the government wanted to like put something else where he like I think they want to put a road on the beach or something like that, where he like.
How would you put a road on the beach?
Yeah, I don't know.
It's actually a bridge.
A bridge?
Yeah, an overpass.
So did he know before, or did the government just decide one day?
Yeah, he said there was no information regarding that until recently they came up with the plan.
Yeah, so anyway, someone just had it in mind, a new guy.
Yeah.
All the money you are making.
We'll shut you down quick. You know, let me tell you a story. This is a story that told me, right? So Sheko told me that, you know, when he and his family were living in Nigeria, they had a situation where somebody brought some equipment to pave the roads, and they never did it. They just brought equipment there, was there for a few weeks, possibly months, and then the equipment disappeared one day. So the people went to like the government and said, hey, what's going on with our road? And then the person in charge came up pull out his paper. I guess this was the plan of roads that were supposed to be paved in Lagos at the time, and says, which one is your road? And they told him, and he went to that and says, okay, I'm looking at it, it's paved. And the people said, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? It's not paved. That's why we're here. No, the guy said, no, it's paved. So they said, why don't you come with us and see it for yourself?
I hope they get to see it.
And the guy replied, I cannot get it out without laughing. Oh my Lord.
Oh, wow.
That is Nigeria for you, right? The guy looked on his paper and said, it's paved. They didn't care that the people that were living there told him it wasn't paved, and they said they should come and take a look. All they cared about was the fact that his paper said it was paved. And that was it.
Because the money has already exchanged. And
the money has gone now. That one has allocated.
So don't try to bring this up. It's too late.
What's the law?
God.
It's too late. And if you remember the landmark, the event that we were at the hall together at the landmark, remember?
Yep.
Remember,
Yep.
we went to the back where there was like the beach side. That was where they had all.
We didn't go there, but we saw it.
Oh, I was actually there. I think that was probably the day you were in with us.
Okay.
We went there for like relaxation, had drinks. And the reason why the owner of Landmark is actually pissed is because they're going to demolish all that attraction. And that's one of the value add that he uses in selling his halls.
Yep.
Because if you're paying to use the hall, it'll be telling you that, hey, you also get the chance to go to the beach because it has like a private access. So taking all that away. And the investment, according to him, was $200 million. That alone is the reason why he had to go on CNN and all the network just to like voice out and scream to the rest of the world, like, come help me.
Yeah. So in the US, you're definitely going to get some value of the money back. Like you're guaranteed that. I think the Connecticut case actually like establishes the fact of eminent domain. I think it's like says like you're gonna get some value of your money back. All right, let me correct myself. The case I thought of was the Kelo versus City of New London, which was it was New London. I was like, what happens in New London? Essentially, the city created a nonprofit that could go after people's private properties and essentially take the private property away from people and have the nonprofit that they own and they created essentially revitalize the whole economy. So they could easily go after like Black people's homes if they wanted to and be like, we don't like all these East Hartford homes, and then like just break it down and then have a nonprofit development board like essentially be the one to do whatever they want. And that was still fine. There is a process, right? So as long as you've gotten if you didn't get all your papers right, that's different. If the government decides that, hey, we're the one who's going to take it after the fact, then you're definitely entitled to a huge chunk of the money you've sunk in,
Two things I was thinking about while you were saying that. So eminent domain exists in Nigeria because I remember learning that in secondary school.
Okay.
How it goes into place or not, I couldn't tell you, right? But I do remember concepts because that's where I learned it, and the actual effective. But the other thing I was going to say is that my recommendation to Nigerians specifically is if you're going to invest money in Nigeria, you need to invest only a small portion of your portfolio, and it should be enough such that if you lost it all, it wouldn't bother you. I think what happens, I hear a lot of stories, and I never met somebody that did this, but I've heard, when you're trying to talk about investing in Nigeria, people will tell you all these stories about somebody who's done it before or whatever. Is that a lot of those stories are people who take significant capital and invest it, and they're in a situation where when the money is lost, they're out. There's nothing else, right? Versus if I'm making the numbers up here, but if I took 2% of my portfolio or 4% of my portfolio and I invest that in Nigeria, I still have 96%. That is doing something else, right? So it's diversifying my portfolio. And if it works out, great. If I lose it all, it's not a big deal, right? This guy, I don't know his story, the Lamarck guy, but like if you're investing 200 million in that property, and you're essentially losing some or significant part of it, that's a big problem, right? So
Nigeria is go big or go home.
And then wake up when you go home the next day to go big and go home again.
Go big and go home. Like there like you enter like some places in Nigeria and you're having like meetings and you're discussing investments, and the numbers that you hear, they'll be helping you understand that, bro, if you're going to come do anything here, you better make sure you're coming with all the big guns and you have all the money. Because not only is the government going to stifle the process, they expect you to come like bow down to be able to do anything significant in the country. So which, in other words, is like you need to have money up front that you're going to invest. And I think part of what is done is use a chunk of this money to kind of build relationships, to be able to have the amount of autonomy and the control is had in that area for a very long time, not knowing that eventually they're going to wake up one day and say, hey, we need to construct that road that we've been abandoning for 50 years.
I'm pretty sure I just pissed someone off, literally. You just pissed someone off and then, you think you don't want to pay me anymore because you have,
Yeah, but how can somebody, like, come on, James, I understand what you're saying and it's probably totally true, but how can you, because you piss somebody off, just do something that's going to affect your livelihood forever?
Oh, yeah. The results are catastrophic. Go big or go home, but...
Now you're going home. Let's kind of do some wrap-up related things, wrapping up the podcast. James, we're going to put you on the hot seat. Yeah. I have a list of questions that I've compiled for our African immigration stories series. There's going to be one actually coming out pretty soon. The one I did with Shegun. It's going to be coming out pretty soon. I'm going to send that to you, but I'm going to ask you a few questions that these are meant to be, don't spend too much time on it. It's just meant to be quick fire questions and talking about the immigration process. And that's what we're going to use to end the podcast. So are you ready?
Do I have a choice?
This is Nigeria. This is Nigeria. There is no choice. Go big or go home.
Go big or go home,
Oh my Lord. All right. So first question. What was your first job in the US and why?
My first actual job was working at Abercrombie and Fitch, which I don't know how they hired me, but they fired me real quick once they realized that James did not fit the portfolio of people that could work at Abercrombie and Fitch. And so there was a settlement case after. I don't know if you guys remember that settlement case where if you have been fired from Abercrombie and Fitch, you might be entitled to some money. But yeah, after my first that
one is Najano de carry last.
So my first shift, they're like, yeah, we're gonna call you next time and maybe not call you again. And then they never just scheduled me again. But my first real job.
Wait. You go.
Why are you laughing? You're laughing at my Milford story. Was it Milford or Bridgeport? One of those malls.
Wait, you got fired up?
They just stopped scheduling me, bro. They just stopped scheduling me. Like this African immigrant that doesn't wear Abercrombie and Fitch wants to work here. What's wrong with him?
Okay.
But it was the real one was working in dining hall. I was at UConn swiping people's cards and cleaning plates. Yeah, that was the real first job.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you had one day in Abercrombie and Fitch, and then you started working at UConn. All right. Second question: what advice would you give to others who are considering immigrating from Africa to either the US or someplace else in the West or Asia? Let's just say the US because you're more familiar with the US.
Well, I think travel is always good. So whether you immigrate or not, I think be exposed, right? So whether you come here for summers or you come here for like, I'm leaving, just come, just diversify your experiences, your exposure, and get some stamps on your passport. It will eventually help you out. And go to that conference in Tanzania. It helps regardless of what happens, just travel. Like I would always give people that first advice. Okay. But to anyone specifically that wants to immigrate, like if you have the opportunity to and you want to do it, absolutely do it. And we have to realize there's going to be a learning curve. There's going to be an adaptation curve. There's going to be you deciding if you really want to go through it, but understand you're learning a different system and how it works. And so it's not going to be all roses and petals. You're going to have to grow personally, financially, mentally, physically. All those will change, and it will change your outlook on a lot of things. So be prepared for that. Be prepared for, nights without parents, like making decisions on your own. Be prepared for all the obstacles that comes with. So, yeah. But if you're traveling before, even if you're going to Benin Republic and Cotonou, you're going to get a diverse experience that it won't be as shocking as when you eventually do move, right?
Yeah, that makes sense in the sense that you've dealt with that separation anxiety, if any, on shorter trips before making that longer
Absolutely.
one.
I have my niece who's like younger than me, like by the time she was like 6 or 8, she's the one who goes to the airports and tells her parents where and everything is. Like she's lucky enough to have that exposure. But you see pictures of her in London and all these places, like having good, not just knowledge, but experience and exposure to other places, right? And she's able to navigate enough to be like, I don't like the United States. I'm like, oh, lucky me. Oh, lucky, the US, the Japan. You've been to all those places and they're exposed, right? Like, that's why you can have a preference, right? And so when she applies for a visa these days, it's easier. Obviously, it's elitist, it's rich, it's all that. But even if it's just like they go to Kaduna, go to Cotonou, go to, expose yourself to the little places that are not your home. Don't just be like most Americans that don't have a passport, right? Like wherever you are, just travel, like leave and be exposed. Yeah. It'll help you in the long run.
So, awesome. James, you're not really following the rules here. It's supposed to be short and quick. You're like going.
You have to understand diplomatic answer. We're diplomatic about it. All right, go. I got it.
I'll ask you 2 more. What are some of the things you miss about your country, your original country?
What I miss about Nigeria the most, I miss not having like the. And maybe just, it's hard explaining this, but see your life. Yeah, can't know for me. I feel like when you go to Nigeria now, you enjoy a little bit more. Your money goes a long way, so you're able to enjoy and you're able to like take things in, right? You're able to take the freedom in. You're able, like, I'm here for 2 weeks or 1 week. You're able to enjoy the food a little better, right? It's not just like processed foods here. Like, you're able to take a little of the joys a little bit more in, whether it's family, like. I miss those little nuances.
Okay.
Exactly. That's what I said. I said the food.
The food too.
It's the food.
Food. But that's what I mean. For Maryland, like food is there, but it's it's like we get good at sports occasionally. But in Stanford, there's nothing.
Actually, Donny has a spot. Donny, Eric's friend.
I know. D-man. Yeah.
Yeah.
I will drop you a location because I'll go and find it out. By the time you start going there, your belly will double. I can promise you that one.
No. You see, the problem with what you're going to do is that you're going to drop me this location. I'm going to go there. And when they show me the menu, I'm going to compare the price to your price.
You see, like this one, there's no menu. It's one food on it. It's Abuja.
Then I will compare the price to your price.
Go and order Chinese and then do difference.
And then I'll be asking myself the question, why am I paying $20 for something I could have bought for $1?
Yeah, like what are those people that are expecting original palm wine when you see the watered down Chinese looking palm wine we get here?
No. All right. So what are some of the things you enjoy about your new country?
There's a level of security. I think we mentioned that earlier. There's a level of security here. Things are a little bit more predictable. There's always going to be light as long as I pay my bill. Unless a cop stops me and I don't have my license, or I'm in Florida or somewhere south, I'm for the most part fine. I just have to make sure, there's predictability and security in the system, right? So things aren't shocking, If I go to work, make this amount of money, I can pay my bills and I can have a little over to eat. Yeah, this predictability.
Okay. And the last question I'm going to ask you for today is, how have you stayed connected to your culture of origin? What challenges have you faced with that?
I think I surrounded myself with like-minded people from the same culture. So most of my friends, we do all the same things together. So whether it's listen to music, attend concerts, Nigerian artists that come here, whether it's go out to Nigerian clubs, whether it is attend each other's events, whether it's go and play ping pong together. You go to my ping pong crew of people or friends that half of them are Nigerian, the other half are non. And so you stay attuned to the culture just by virtue of the people you associate with. I think with that, with dressing, fashion, you're able to just keep in tune with what's happening. To the extent that I'm missing anything, I think one of the things you lose most when you're in a foreign land is language. So I make it a point to try and talk to people in my language as much as possible. And even if it's just those little tidbits and those idiomatic expressions that we use, that I try and bring back in, just so that I don't lose touch of a command and control of the language. That is one thing I know that I'm missing a lot more, because sometimes I start idioms and proverbs and expressions, and halfway through it, I'm like, how exactly does that proverb go? Like, I'm halfway through the phrase, like I got the first clause now, and then the second clause is like, how is that intonation? Is it the complex noun, or how does it end? You have an idea of what's supposed to, how it's supposed to sound, but do you actually remember the phrase as is? So losing track of the language is one of those things that I do.
Does ChatGPT even have answers to all this? It's not at that level yet.
It's not there yet. You start, you go back, and then halfway there, you're like, okay, you're like those little nuances, you miss those. And then you're like,
you start training a model for this.
Yeah, and then you look for your translator and you're like, huh? That's not what I said,
This has been fun. We're done. Thank you both for this. Next time you come on, James, we're going to do an African immigration stories. If you decide to come on again, and that one's going to be not like an open form. It's going to be open form conversation, but it's going to be more of an interview where we ask you a bunch of questions, kind of like on the paper you saw there.
Okay.
And then dive into some things based on what you tell us, right? So
I've always said you guys should do this. I was always like, it'll be better if you can be not syndicated is not the word I'm looking for, but if you can be carrying on multiple platforms. And, have an audio, a podcast, everything, a video. Like, I think there's a space that at least that links Africans as well as Africans in diaspora and interviews people, not only just for their experiences, but just education, what they're doing in their lives. They're very important people doing very important work. I've always thought like that sort of like we needed an African Jon Stewart who was able to navigate both Nigeria or both Africa at large and America and make the connections, like make it make sense. So to the extent that you guys can, keep that torch going and keep bridging that gap, kudos to you guys.
I'm writing you this letter and letting you know that my brother, he go better, he done better. I'm writing you this letter and letting you know that my sister, he go better, he done better. Said it's gonna get